Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Superhuman Entrepreneur. I'm your host, Dr. Matthew Accurso, and like always, I'm going to bring you another superhuman in the world. You know, I found out about Dr. Andy Galpin through some research that I was doing, and I came across one of his videos, and the video was 2.5 hours long, I believe. But let me tell you this. Here's the amazing part about Dr. Andy, is that he has a website where he freely gives this brilliant evidence-based information, and he's not charging a penny for it. And here's another thing. All the years of graduate school that I went through, I mean, it takes hundreds of thousands of dollars to obtain knowledge like the knowledge that Dr. Andy Galpin is delivering online. And when I went on, I was just blown away by how he just openly shared all this information. Wasn't selling a coaching program, wasn't trying to, put a product in anywhere. He just was giving it freely. So it really blew me away. So we have Dr. Andy Galpin on today. I want to explain to you a little bit about this amazing man. Dr. Andy Galpin is a professor of kinesiology at the Center for Sport Performance at California State University, Fullerton. He has a PhD in human bioenergetics and is the founder and director of the Biochemistry and Molecular Physiological Exercise Laboratory. He also has a new book coming out, Unplugged, and we got him on the show today. Dr. Andy Galpin, thanks for being on with me, man.
Man, that was extensive.
Is that good?
Made me feel all conscious now. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm honestly I'm truly humbled that you'd say such kind things, and that those videos were helpful and inspiring to you. That's really all I do them for is to help people. So
thanks, man.
Thank you.
Yeah. And right back at you, man. It's just an honor to be on this call with you, and even more of an honor to get you educating on the podcast to the thousands that are listening right now. I want to start with your website, because your website's fascinating. It's andygalpin.com, and you go on the website and it says, "We educate, entertain, and inspire the world through storytelling." And I just want to read this paragraph below it. It says, "University classes are too expensive, slow, and boring, and they rarely cover actionable information, especially in the area of exercise and nutrition." Amen. Hallelujah. Okay, right? Strength and conditioning, health, exercise, nutrition, supplements, exercise programming, and human movement are rarely actually covered or require years of prerequisites, right? And so I read that and I'm like, because you're exactly right. So what drove you to say, okay, I'm not going to kind of go the way, like the common way that, a lot of doctors, a lot of experts go. You went this other way to try and educate the world and do it in an amazing platform and deliver it for free. What drove you to do that?
Well, I guess I'll start with the bad stuff and then kind of work back to the stuff that might make you like me more. Because I'd be lying if I say like it's completely altruistic. Like a big part of why I did it was like I felt like I continued to have the same conversation over and over again, and I kept having the same emails, phone calls, and people that wanted the same things, and I'm like, I'm saying this over and over again. So part of me was like, man, what if you just make a video, say it one time, and you could just send a link every time someone asks you that question? Like it would save you a tremendous amount of time, because I hate just not answering people. Whether you reach out to me on email or the website or whatever, I hate not getting back to people, especially when it's something like, hey, I'm 27 years old. Like I'm just trying to get into health and exercise. I have a degree in architecture. Like I really just want some help here. I'm like, man, like what am I going to say? Like, well, go back and take 4 years of classes. Like that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So like, I'm like, man, I want to help these people, but it's so time consuming, especially when you have a public email address like I have to have.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I can either make the choice of not responding to these people or like literally doing nothing but responding to emails of people that I don't know, and I would never get anything accomplished.
Yeah.
So part of it was that. And, the other big part was I was working on a project a couple of years ago called Barbell University with my close friends from Barbell Shrugged, if you're familiar with those.
Yeah, I am. Yep.
And we wanted to basically make an entire online university with things like this. And for a bunch of reasons, it sort of fell apart. And it was really hard on myself and Doug and Doug's brother, Mike, who had moved up from Australia to work on the project. It was hard to have to kill that baby, but it was wonderful because literally an hour or something after that project got ended, I was laying on the floor in my front room and I was like, oh my God, I think I know what I want to do. And that was like, I hate all business stuff. I'm just really abrasive to all those things. And I'm not saying it's bad. Like, it's just personality wise,
Yeah.
it doesn't fit me. I don't have a single idea of how to start a company. I don't have any idea how to market and I just don't feel good doing those things. I hate sales, all that stuff. And so I was like, well, what do you want to do about this project? Like, well, I really want to just get inspiring videos out there. And as I mentioned, the first, like, my wife sort of helped me realize when I was just spending time to personally reflect on things, like, what is it you actually do? Because I don't necessarily identify with being a scientist. I'm not necessarily a strength coach anymore. And she's like, dude, all you do is tell stories.
Mm.
And I was like,
wow,
fuck, dude, shit, you're kind of right. Like,
they're always right.
I'm a storyteller.
Yeah.
And it's funny because at the time she was actually making fun of me. Like you can't have a conversation with anybody without telling a story. Like, just answer a damn question.
Right.
Everything has to be a story.
Right.
But it hit me. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. Like, that's what I do. I tell stories. I just do it with these things. So
that's cool.
To finally answer your question, I was like, shit, I think I just want to make a website, and I don't want to deal with collecting newsletters, and I don't want to deal with upsales and funnels and tripwire stuff. Like, I just want to make a website and give stuff away to people. And I don't know, like, maybe they'll like that. If they don't, like, that's fine too. Like,
yeah.
That's it, man.
That's cool. And what I'm hearing from you is that, you're living in your calling. It sounds like, it's like, this is the thing, this is your core. This is what drives you every day. And I always say that thing that wakes you up and that allows you to say, I don't have to go in to the clinic or the lab or do this. I get to do that. That's truly where I desire to reside. I know that you desire to reside there. And I know a lot of people listening also desire to reside there. What would you say? I mean, because obviously there's risk involved there, right? I mean, you just don't know how it's going to pan out. And sometimes it takes leaving something that's comfortable and going into this area where it's kind of an unknown territory. What would you say is like the one thing that you thought about that told you, hey, like you have to do this no matter what it takes. Like, this is the thing, like, you got to go get it.
Well, I mean, a part of it was my friend Chris Moore. He passed away unexpectedly a couple of years ago, and he was like, he had a real hard time dealing with life in certain areas because all he wanted to do was give and donate and things like that, which that's great. But at some point you got to feed your kids.
Yeah.
And things like that. And so a big part of it was like, right after he passed, I was like, you know what? One of the things I admired about him so much was his service and gratitude towards other people. And I have that calling as well. And I'm like, you stop worrying about the shit that you don't really care about and just go do that. And I think you'll feel just far more rewarded.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that, like, I don't know how it's going to pan out. There was a bit of risk, but let's be real. Like, if you look at my website, it's like very clearly a $200 Squarespace. like I don't have any idea or time to spend in building. Like, half the pages aren't even done. I'm just like, just get the content up. Like, the rest of the crap we'll figure it out. So for me, the only risk was a massive waste of time.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how to make videos. Like, they're pretty janky and they're not like highly well produced, but the content I think is pretty solid.
Yeah.
So that was my risk, is like, well, all right, you waste some Saturday afternoons and some Sundays, and like, well, as long as I do that, like, I'm fine with that. Like, I don't really care if I have 125 views or 7,000 views or whatever. Like, if 12 people watched it and those 12 people got happy and got something, fine. Like, I'm good there. So,
yeah. And that's cool, because you can see that it's very clear when you speak and the way that you educate that you don't care about those things, and that you're not going the way of the popular content. I mean, there's some content that you talk about is going against what's popular right now. It's going against what's trending. So it's very clear that you're like, I'm all about the research. I'm all about like what's in front of us right now. Like, what's the truth in this moment? Because obviously, and you've mentioned this on your videos, like, things change. Like, and it's really cool. You said it a couple times. You're like, if I'm wrong a year from now, I'm going to be the first to raise my hand and say, I'm wrong, And I think that's such a game changer, especially in the doctor world, in the expert world, in this world where, everybody's a keyboard cowboy and an expert. And it's like, everybody's, and I know you probably get it a lot where you'll post a video and somebody be like, that's wrong, because I read this one paper on Facebook or whatever.
Right.
And it's it's just a crazy world that we're living in right now, but you're putting out these videos, and they're 100% evidence-based. Like everything you say is things you've researched, things that you've spent thousands and thousands of hours on, or hundreds of hours on. And I think that's really cool. I think that's, so more and more people are seeing that. That's why you're getting on these amazing shows. Like, I think you were on Joe Rogan recently, talking it up with him. And then other people are deciding to interview you because they're seeing like you're the real deal. So in being the real deal,
I'm in Sacramento right now. I just got done doing 2 monster ones with Mark Bell.
Oh, cool.
Spent a whole day at his gym, and
nice.
Joe DeFranco, and going down to
nice, man.
So like, it was kind of some pretty big. And then of course, Superhuman Entrepreneur, like that's the biggest one I've ever done.
Yeah, man. So I want to get into it with you for a little bit, because you're a wealth of knowledge. And for those listening out there, as a lot of you know, it's easy to get on the internet and find something and say, okay, like this sounds right. I'm just going to go ahead and do this. But how do you know it's right? How do you know like that person that's educating you has the wherewithal, the knowledge, the education to actually give you the right?
I'm going to cut you off right there on
Go
purpose.
Ahead. Yeah.
So that's an intentional cutoff.
Yeah.
And it actually goes back to what you were saying just a second ago with the reason I do, and I speak the way I speak, and the way I put the videos up the way I put them up, is because I think the first fundamental problem we have in this nutrition and exercise space, I'm sure in other places, but this is the 2 I can speak on, is why we're so damn concerned about being right.
For sure, man.
Why is this such a big deal?
Yeah.
Like, why do we all have to feel like we're completely infallible?
Yeah. Especially guys,
that's not
right?
helpful.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, like, I'm sure.
I mean, it's with everybody. My wife is,
my wife is plenty like that too sometimes.
But I think it's, and I think you'll agree. I mean, there's a lot of ego, especially now in this day and age where so much information is being shared. If you get proven wrong, like I think people feel like it's going to like take a chunk out of their heart or something like that.
Well, so here's what I can speak to you. Like, it's a classic sign of immaturity, and it's a classic sign of lack of confidence in yourself. And here's what I mean, because I'll put my hand up again. Like, I have made this mistake. I will make it again many times.
Yeah.
Like, this is not a place you're at. It's a moving ball at all times, right?
Right.
But what the mistake, and I can give you one specific story about that. And that is when I first started working with professional athletes years ago, and you're 22 years old, and you've got NFL Pro Bowlers, and you've got Hall of Famers, and you've got these high caliber folks that are making $20 million a year. Like, you're terrified to show any ounce of vulnerability because you think if I'm wrong about the slightest little thing, like if we're talking about music, and I think that Tupac's album Tupacalypse came out in 92 and it came out in 91, like, oh my God, they're going to leave me and they're never going to work with me again.
I wouldn't be friends with you if you got that wrong. You know what I mean?
Nor would I. I would leave myself too.
Absolutely not.
91.
91. Nice.
But like, it's just the same thing. It's like, I mean, you're so scared and you're so insecure that you have to feel like you have to be right at all times, because if you show any ounce of flaw, then that athlete is going to leave you, and then your business is going to go out and you're going to lose that client. Well, if you look at the high level performers, like, they don't have that insecurity. And there's a reason, right? There's a direct correlation there. I mean, how many times has LeBron James admitted, that was a mistake? Yeah. Like, did all of a sudden it was like, wow, maybe he's not the greatest. Yeah. No, right? Like, pick your analogy. Steve Jobs.
If anything, it draws people to you when you do.
That's exactly right. I'm telling you right now, I've made mistakes with professional athletes, and I've gone, hey, that's on me. Like, I totally screwed that one up. And I have never in my career had someone leave me because of that. Never once. Yep. And in fact, every single time I've really owned that, I've gotten closer relationships with them, and they'll never leave me now. Ever. Yeah. So because they realize, like, oh, dude, he's actually in it for me, and he was going to do the best possible thing for me. And he's willing, like, not for him, because for him, the best scenario would be to blame somebody else to look that thing. But he actually is willing to embarrass himself, admit fault, all those things, lose credibility if it's better for me. that's what an athlete wants, because you're going to make mistakes, especially with nutrition.
Yeah.
Like if anyone says anything else about nutrition, that it's anything besides a complete guessing game, they're completely lying or trying to sell you something.
Yeah.
Or they're so young in the field, they're ignorant. They have no idea what they don't know.
Yeah.
So like I constantly make mistakes with my athletes. I mean, I got a phone call with one of my UFC fighters here when we're done. He's got a fight coming up in Fresno, Scott Holtzman. Mm-hmm. And like the first camp I worked with him, like I made a couple of them, I'm like, oh my gosh, like that didn't work at all. And this was right before a big UFC fight. But now, because I was like, oh shit, dude, that was my fault. Now he's much more willing to trust me when I say something, because he knows like he's not going to worry about that flaw. He's going to focus more on like, man, he's really concerned with how I do, and he's really cares. So yeah, I mean that's a basic leadership 101.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Pick your reference. Whoever you want to talk about is where you learned your leadership skills from, or whatever book you want, but they're almost all going to say the same thing. It's like you've got to have that humility, and I approach the field no different. I mean, like I was joking yesterday, like, man, I'm just glad we didn't have Twitter and Facebook when I was coming up as a student, because people have a lot of material on
for sure, man. Right, exactly. Exactly. Well, it's funny, like we're talking about this because there was a study on vitamin D. Like basically everything we're doing to measure vitamin D right now is wrong.
Yeah, gram close.
Erase everything. So right there, I mean, that's like blatant obvious. Okay, we've been doing everything wrong. Now we have to start over. All of you who've made a business on that old model, it's just like, okay, you just throw in the bag, like it's time to redo things. And I think like those people that are able to just stand up and say, hey, that was me. Like that's the evidence we had at the time, and that was the best evidence we had, and now it's changed. And so it's cool. Like we don't need to like go after anybody. I mean, like those are people that we're generally wanting to help, and that's what we're talking about, right? Yeah.
I agree. I mean, we saw the same thing happen with fish oil.
Yeah.
Right. Like you're going to see the same thing happen with probiotics here pretty soon. Right. Like,
for sure.
Great. We're all, and yes, like I think you said it extremely well, and I want to reiterate that. Like I have no problem with that mistake when people are like, well, hey, this is what we thought was best for you. All right, well, okay, let's rehash it. How many of you actually felt some benefits? Okay, you. Okay, great. Well, let's focus on you. Maybe there's some issue there. How many of you didn't feel anything? Okay, you. All right, well, let's try a different approach. Like, because some of them did work. Some people did, I'm sure, improve markers, but it's not like we were completely wrong or backwards, but maybe weren't as specific as possible. That's what Graham's paper really said.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So now we just need to go to the next level, and I don't see why that's harmful. Like we did the best we could with the information we had, as we know it now, is the way I like to end every sentence in science. Like this is how it is, as we know it now.
Right. I like that. That's awesome.
I mean, but that's the definition of science. Like it's based on the concept of ignoramus, right? Like
exactly.
Sapiens, the guy outlined that book, and I was like, yeah, like this is what every scientist is taught from day one. That it's by definition saying I don't know mostly this. Like if I knew it, we wouldn't study it anymore.
Yep.
So the fact that we're studying says we don't actually know what's going on.
Yep.
So anything science-based is actually based in not knowing.
Yeah.
Or admitting we don't know a bunch of stuff and we're really wrong on a lot of it. So that is science.
And it's a process. This is a healthy this is really healthy, because honestly, I think that it's so freeing to say those things as well, right? I mean, when you can actually just like say like, I don't know everything, and I'm never going to know anything, and this is everything, and this is what I know right now in this moment. It's such a freeing thing. That's cool that we're talking about this.
Science is a verb, not a noun.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it is a verb. It is a process. It is not a thing. Like I teach my students all the time. Like I've done this, and I've done a lot of podcasts, and I've done a lot of things, and I've listened to other people's stuff, and I'm like, I'll hear somebody that says something about nutrition, which I have a PhD in biochemistry.
Right.
And human biochemistry, muscle physiology specifically. And I'll hear all the time people that have just like undergrad degrees or totally not even related to the field, and they'll say some stuff, and I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's pretty cool.
That's cool.
Awesome. And I'm totally dived in. I'm taking notes, the same thing. And I'm like, there's only a few things in the world that I could really talk about at a high level that I don't think anyone else in the world knows as much about. Yeah. But the rest of it, man, I'm like,
yeah.
So you got to be careful, man. Like there's some smart dudes on the internet, and if you walk around just thinking you've got it all known, boy, physiology is way too complex. You're going to made to be look stupid real soon. So
for sure.
There's no need. It doesn't help anything.
So along the lines of, because you're obviously working with elite athletes. So you work a lot with UFC fighters. Is that?
I mean,
For the most part?
not a lot, but
Okay. But
on
you got some
occasion.
big dogs. You're working with some big dogs in the industry.
Yeah.
What would you say? And I know like this kind of goes in line with what we're talking about. There's things are always changing. Just like nobody is the same person. We're all different. There's no like there's this whole thing with ketosis and and carb restriction and all that. Like no one's the same. And something might work for one athlete and it might not work for another athlete. So you can't say here's a diet, here's a book, here's the manual, go do that, right? It's all different. So what would you say in your experience, are there things that you found are good overall in general performance increasers for like the guy on the street who just wants to increase his performance? He's not trying to like, throw bows in the octagon, but he's just trying to increase his performance, be a better dad, be a better husband, be a better executive.
So like I have what I call the 90% rule, and we'll just attack this from nutrition first, and then maybe I'll try to keep this short and we could jump into like exercise or sleep or whatever else you want after that.
Okay.
But the 90%, actually I'm about to release a video on my website about this. So you can fill in more details on this one, but I think that about 90% of all diets or nutrition plans, and I'm totally making 90% up, by the way. It's like, that joke about like every stat on 90% of statistics are made up on the spot.
Yeah.
It's like a pun there, but 90% of 90% says like 90% of diets are 90% the same. Yeah. And so we'll just hit that Pareto rule right now, which is like, what is it, 80 or 20 or 90% or whatever of the same things. I'm sorry, man, I'm about to disappoint you, but it's going to be things that you've heard since you were a third grader.
Yeah.
Like eat fruits and vegetables, eat plants and animals, like eat things that are alive or that were alive. Try to eat them as close to when they were killed or picked as possible. Try to have a decent balance of macronutrients, so fat, protein, carbohydrates, and a lot of water. Sleep a lot. Control your emotions, like exert yourself, challenge yourself, and do some stress and some suffering in your life. Like, I don't think it has to be, for 90% of us, 90% of the time, it has to be that much more complicated. And whether you want to do 6 meals a day or 3 meals a day, I find that to be generally irrelevant. Or maybe I can say that better as saying like that's extremely specific to the person.
Yeah.
So try both. It's not going to really matter either way. Whether you want to have a certain type of protein, those things don't necessarily matter. Variety is extremely important. So the more variation you can get in your food sources, both with your plants and animals and your protein sources and your fat sources. If your only fat source are nuts and avocados, like that's too limited. If the only protein you eat is chicken breasts and frozen salmon, like that's too limited. So the more variation you can get, the better. And outside of that, like that's going to put you even, like, honestly, the vast majority of my conversations with professional athletes or NBA players, NFL players, I'm like, I'm telling you the dirty secrets that I tell them. Like, this is most of the conversation I have with them is like, can you do these 5 things?
Right.
All right.
Are there supplements that you are just staunch on? Like, you got to be taking this, you got to be taking that. No. Okay.
No, I mean, the ones that I can give you, like, just, which are like, typically the most efficacious, creatine, like it almost never fails people. It's very unlikely that you're going to react poorly to creatine. There's very little harmful effect, and there tends to be a decent amount of benefit.
Do you recommend someone get off of it on a week, off a week? Do you have a regimen?
Not on a week, off a week. I'd probably say be consistent for at least a month or 2.
Yeah.
But then come off. There's no supplement that I think you should ever take year round, including fish oil, including vitamin D, including probiotics or prebiotics. Like, I don't think you should ever take those things full year round. Creatine would be the same thing.
Yeah.
Protein powder, whatever you want to do. Yeah. Beta alanine tends to be very, very effective. I haven't taken it in a while. I'll probably start again here soon, but that's very cheap, has very limited side effects, tends to be very effective. Caffeine, if you feel like you need it, the same thing, but that one you do need to cycle more often. I think I actually have an article posted up on Barbell Shrugged website where I list like my top 5 or 7 supplements, how to take them, what order, how much, all the volumes, like that's all listed up there if you Now it's funny because
Yeah.
that's a bit like, that's like 3 years old. And I think if I went back on that, I would actually change my mind on all those things. But
It's time.
it's a pretty good starting point nonetheless. So
I'm going to put, by the way, I'm going to put everything that Dr. Andy Galpin's mentioning, I'm going to put it in my show notes. So if you're like, oh, what article was that? It's going to be in my show notes. No worries about that. So, okay, that's great. Great information. That's definitely, my uncle
you want
was
to do training real fast?
Let's do it.
Okay, sorry. I just want to I heard that voice in my head being like, someone's probably going, what about the training?
Yeah, for sure.
For the average person, like you just said, I think the big key is variation. And so that means, I think if you look at the spectrum from, jogging for an hour all the way down to say a 1 rep max vertical jump.
Yep.
All right. Well, you should train everything in between. So in the book, actually Unplugged, that you mentioned at the beginning, we do have a little bit of guidelines about how you should integrate all of these things in for the person, like the person you just mentioned. Like, I don't have a training goal. I'm not competing in powerlifting. Like, well, how often should I do intervals? How often should I lift heavy? How often should I do cardio? How often should I mix things up? And there's no specific guideline, but it would basically be like, I don't know, once a week or so, you should probably do something that is 30 minutes to 60 minutes of steady state. Right? So if you want to swing a kettlebell, you want to carry something, you want to push a sled, you want to jog, swim, cycle, row, that detail doesn't matter as much. You should probably do something once or twice a week that gets your heart rate to a max, then you should recover and you should repeat that. It doesn't matter. Pick your modality: CrossFit, circuits, intervals, sled swimming, like jog, sprints, who cares?
Yeah.
You should probably do something once a week that requires you to move extremely fast.
Like a Tabata training type thing.
No, like fast.
Like just running? Anything fast. You're saying anything.
Like vertical jump, like once.
Gotcha. Okay.
Like swing a kettlebell as fast as you can once. Right? Jump onto a box once. Not like circuits. We're already going to got the circuits otherwise, but something that literally requires like maximal power output.
Okay.
Throw a medicine ball as far as you can once.
And change it up. So you're saying like do it once. So one of each thing, changing it up.
Whatever, yeah. 1 rep. My point with speed is like something that is actually it's not fatiguing at all.
Okay.
Like if you're getting tired, you're not getting speed work done.
Interesting. Okay. So you're literally saying one time. Do it one time.
Yeah. And you would, of course, do like, 10 or 12 or 15 rounds of that.
Right.
You could do 2 or 3 reps. Like, 1 is not magical, but literally something like, imagine you had a medicine ball and you threw it as far as you could. And you had a partner and they threw it back. Yeah. And you took, a minute or 2 to recover or whatever, shake it out, focus on your breath, whatever, get in position, boom, throw it as fast as you can again. And you could do 15 or 20 reps of that, 10 maybe. Maybe you do 2 or 3 different throws. You throw one over your head, you throw one sideways, then maybe you do like some vertical jumps. You're done. That's it.
Yep. How long are you talking? Like how long would that take?
Anywhere between, after you're good and thoroughly warmed up, because the key to that stuff is you have to be very, very warmed up.
Yeah.
And those can be as little as 10 minutes.
And then you're done and then you're saying done for the day.
If you want.
Yeah. Or, add a run later on or something like that.
Yeah. Or they'll go and do Tabata, do some circuits, do some heavy lifting, like whatever. Yeah. Just once a week, you should do something that requires you to explode as fast and as hard as you can. That's it. Yeah. 10 times maybe. So it depends on your program. You can integrate them, but the same thing with strength. So do something once a week or so that requires you to pick up something that's pretty heavy. Or push something, or pull something, or drag something that's kind of heavy. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And then probably once a week, you should do something that improves your mobility or your movement quality or your motor control or, all those things that make your joints and muscles perform better. Right? Of course, these are minimums once a week. Like maintenance and things like that are probably need to be there more than once a week, 2, 3, 4, 5 times a week, probably, but a minimum. And so if you start stacking that stuff together, you can say, okay, maybe I'm working out 3 times a week. So maybe here's what it's going to look like. Monday, I'm going to do 10 or 15 minutes of whatever term you want to call it, mobility or prehab or movement or, whatever term you like to use in your clinic. Yeah. Cool. I'm going to do 10 minutes of that. I'm going to get really thoroughly warmed up, and then I'm going to do maybe some medicine ball throws and some very light jumps. And I'm going to do 10 sets of 2 repetitions each. So I'll jump twice as high as I can, take a minute or 2 off, or whatever, do that again. And then I'll finish that up by doing a 30-minute circuit with 2 or 3 exercises, or a 15-minute circuit. Okay, well, you actually just knocked off like 3 or 4 things on day 1.
Yeah.
Wednesday, you come back and you do maybe some mobility stuff, and then you just do straight accessory work, and the repetitions get up to 20 or 30 reps a piece, and you really build some joint stability, and you add some muscle mass and things like that. And that would be like maybe a quote unquote bodybuilding workout. Fine. Yeah. And then maybe day 3, you just go for like a 45-minute easy circuit where you do 10 minutes on the bike, 10 minutes on the rower, 10 minutes on the elliptical, and 5 minutes of shadow boxing.
Yeah.
Whatever, something like that. And it's like, okay, you kind of knocked off all those things I said in 3 easy workouts that are no more than 45 minutes each.
Yeah.
And now you're pretty damn well rounded, and you've kind of covered all your physiological bases. You'll keep your joints healthy, you keep your cardiovascular system up, you'll keep your fat down, you keep your muscle mass up, and you'll keep your function high.
And would you say that building muscle, you'd have to take it to another level as far as gaining muscle?
Depends, but no.
Yeah. You could maintain that, but basically increase, like for instance, if you're doing heavy stuff, increase it every once in a while. Are you a big advocate of that? Increasing the weight, like to these astronomical numbers, or what's your take on that?
Well, sure. Progressive overload is completely essential to progress. Like you're not going to ever get stronger if you don't progressively overload.
Yeah.
But how much you take it to is depending on your goal and your situation.
Right.
I think it is a mistake to be scared of going heavier, but we also need to be realistic and reasonable. And we probably need to progress a lot slower than we think.
Yeah.
But there should be progression there. Absolutely. That's a major mistake that you see people with their quote unquote exercises. Like I go to the gym, I do the same rounds and the same reps and the same sets, the same weight every time. Well, you've burned calories, but you're not getting any physically better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, you have to have some overload.
Now, are you the type are you in a gym during your week, like working out, or do you like to take it outside of the gym and do other things?
I do both.
Yeah.
My garage is a gym.
Yep.
So like it's all built up to be a gym. But I also like in my lab and in my facility, we've got 3 or 4 gyms, or equipment. But sometimes, we're outside, we're pushing a sled up and down the street, which is quite funny because we live in this little neighborhood and people are always like, what in the hell are those 2 kids doing?
That sounds fun, man. That's right up my alley.
Yeah, man. Like we'll go for a jog with the dogs sometime.
Yep.
We go down to the beach and we'll do some sprints in the sand. We'll do circuits. So like sometimes I'll kickbox and we'll do it outside. Sometimes I'll go to jiu-jitsu and do it indoors. Like I don't let those things come. Sometimes we go to the mountains and hike for 5 hours, 8 hours or whatever. So this is one of the things that we talk about in the book too, is like it doesn't have to always be one way.
Yeah.
And the more that we can get outside, like generally the better. But then there's also some things that probably just aren't going to function well outside. So, let's integrate them. I also try to do other things in my practice. Like most of you listening, my life is full with a lot of meetings and a lot of phone calls and a lot of things like this. And so I try to spend as many of those outside walking as I can.
Yeah.
All right. Now I don't really consider those training, but like I'll actually end up most days walking for 2 to 3 hours a day.
Yeah.
Because I'm on so many calls and stuff. And I'm like, well, if I can get outside during half of those.
Yeah.
And even if I'm pacing around my little tiny backyard, like that's better. And I'm in the sun or I'm in the elements a little bit. Like these are all just little things you can do that don't really change your life that much, but that will change your life a lot.
Yeah. I almost feel like the standard gym has kind of ruined it for people in exercise. Like I'm not against gyms. Like I think gyms can be great, but you know what I mean? But it's almost like we've lost, like when we think about exercise, oftentimes we just think about muscles. Like I'm going to, you know what I mean? Or heart health, but it's actually so much more, right? I mean, like the mind, you're working the mind, like consciously, like the things that you look at, changing your environment, what you breathe, how you're breathing, the air that you're breathing, right?
Yeah, I'll give you a really good example. I was literally talking about this on Mark Bell's podcast yesterday with vitamin D, because the same exact topic came up.
Yeah.
So it's like you're spying on us, dude. That's weird.
It's like what?
You're spying on me.
Oh yeah. Right. I'm stalking you. I'm absolutely, I mean, taking a lot. This whole book is just your talks, man. That's all it is, man.
Yeah. So we were talking about this, and Mark asked about vitamin D, and I said, here's why I don't take it anymore. This is actually prior to Graham's paper coming out. I said, like, look, I got some blood work done and my vitamin D was a little bit low. So I needed vitamin D. I could have outsourced that to supplements, but I am the type of person, like, I thought back and I was like, well, why do I have low vitamin D? That's because I'm not in the sun very often, which is very antithetical to the fact that I live in Southern California.
Yeah.
Which actually helped me, because I was like, dude, you live in SoCal. It's been like a 3-year drought and you can't find time to get in the sun. Like, if you can't do it, how the hell is somebody in Minnesota?
Right.
Like you can't make any comments about anybody else ever doing it.
Right.
Like, you got to start with yourself here. Yeah. And so I was like, fine. So I made a very specific change to get outside more. So I didn't care about fixing the vitamin D by getting the vitamin D. I knew that that was a marker of an unhealthy lifestyle or a less than optimal lifestyle. So get your ass outside more. And so what I started doing is making sure, like, if I got a call, I'm going to walk the dogs, right? I'm going to get outside. Well, here's what happened. I have 2 rescues dogs, but they're shepherd mixes. If you know anything about shepherds, they're extremely smart and they take a tremendous amount of exercise.
Yeah.
So what I noticed, I'm like, dude, they're getting like an extra 2 hours, because they get 2 workouts a day. And that just like keeps them at a reasonable sanity. And I started noticing that they're getting like an extra hour plus of walking a day. And they started to act up less. And they started to not terrorize the house as much. And they don't really do any of those things. Just like little stuff. And then it was also easier if something came up and I had to skip one of their post walks or one of their morning walks because something unexpected happened. It wasn't the end of the world. And I noticed actually that relieved a lot of anxiety out of myself and out of my wife. And that actually gave us freedom to like go out to dinner on a weeknight or something, which she loves. And I'm like, oh my God, now all of a sudden I get to spend more time with her. And she's happy when she comes home. She comes home and the house isn't like torn to pieces.
Yeah.
And that got all of a sudden better. And I started noticing, like, I met a neighbor who actually, we ended up having a business thing together, and I had no idea. I've lived next to him for 2 years. I've never even met him. Like, and all these things started like falling into place. And so just like you mentioned, like, here are all these other benefits that I got by fixing the lifestyle and not just worrying about the small problem of vitamin D. So by getting out there, exposure, like when I was writing my book, especially, I realized actually there's a chapter in my book where I wrote a little bit about this. And I was like, dude, I realized that I had been walking around my neighborhood for 2 years and I had no idea what any of the streets were.
Isn't that crazy? I
had no clue.
Yeah.
Like, I had no idea there's a giant turkey vulture in my neighborhood that I had never seen before. And I'm like, this is amazing, right? Like,
yeah.
And it literally helped me, because at the time that was work. Like, I was writing a book about being unplugged. And I'm like, dude, this is a great section. So that literally contributed to my work. And I added that section. And so just like all those ancillary benefits of things like that are, I mean, you nailed it. That's exactly right. It's not just worry about like, I got to burn calories or I got to lose fat or whatever. Like, let's improve the lifestyle and look how many other things are going to take care of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it does. It brings on all these other elements of joy, and you actually start enjoying yourself. I mean, gosh, I speak to so many people, and I know you do the same, where it's like, there's no longer joy in what they're doing, you know? And I've been there too. It's like, you know, you go through the motions and now you're doing it and you're forcing it. And you kind of think that's the normal, like, man, I just gotta force it. And obviously there's elements of exercise that you do have to, like, you got to pick yourself up in the morning and say, okay, like, it's time to turn it on. But I think that, like you said, I mean, taking a walk and exploring and like being able to, like, you know, run in an area maybe where you've never ran before and find new things. It makes it interesting, you know?
Well, that's actually literally what happened is Natasha was out walking them one day and she stumbled upon a park that was, I don't know, a mile from our house that we had never known was there. And now we take them there all the time. We let them off the leash. They run around, get themselves completely exhausted and crazy in like 20 minutes. And that saves us having to walk them for an hour when I can run them over there real fast. They get exhausted in 15 minutes and they're so much happier because they get to run off the leash and they come back. And that just saved me half an hour a day, every day.
You know, it's funny. I'm a big surfer, and so right now we're in a condo on the beach. We just had this huge hurricane that hit. we had to leave for a little while. We came back to the condo. And it's crazy because like now we have all this crazy driftwood on the beach, but it's cool because you'll be running and all of a sudden like it's all new now. So like the beach is pretty repetitive, but now we're finding all these new pieces of driftwood. But there was this time the other week where I started running backwards with my daughters. So like they would try to catch me and I'd run backwards so I could look at them and make googly faces at them and tease them. And I scraped my feet on the sand. And I kind of started making these like little half moon circles with my feet as I ran backwards. And it kind of started, and this is my nerd coming out, and I know you have the same kind of nerd in you as well, Andy, is it started to look like an intestinal tract, okay, on the sand. Okay? So it started to look like an intestinal tract. So I'm doing this and now I'm like kind of taking short turns and like making circles with it. And they're following this path, okay? So literally we did this for probably 15, 20 minutes to where the edge of my toes started to get sore because I started to make this intestinal tract, but they started running this track. And so now I call it the intestinal track and we'll make it on the beach and my girls will run this track and it wears them out, man. It wears them out in like 20 minutes and they're toast. And so we do it right around 6:30. Then and they're just toast on the couch. It makes bedtime really easy. But
did you literally just make your children poop?
Yes, exactly.
Fantastic.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So
dad of the year,
man, dad of the year. So anyway, I don't know if you guys have plans for kids, but that's a really good one if you're on the beach.
Good note.
Right. So I want to talk about a few things that, I'm just interested to get your take on because you're the expert that you are. I would love for you to explain to the audience like your take on ketosis, because obviously that's a big one right now. I mean, it seems like everyone I talk to nowadays is like, yeah, I want to get into ketosis. I want to burn fat, build muscle, da, da, da. But I know that you look at it a little bit differently. Talk about how you look at that process and is it for everybody?
Yeah. So, I mean, to highlight the point more, like if you pay attention to Mark Bell at all, like he's literally waging a quote unquote war on carbs right now, right? He's super into keto and he just had me up here in like a 4-hour podcast yesterday.
Yeah.
Which is to say like, cause I have not an opposing view, but I do look at it a little bit differently, which is to say I am pro options.
Yeah.
Like I like people having options.
Yeah.
We're all different. And there is a difference between truth and implementation.
Sure.
And this is where I think people won't discuss the different layers or they get so caught up or we can't have productive conversations about keto or anything else, nutrition, diet, or training related, because people won't tease out, okay, what is the actual physiology? What is the psychology? What's the motivation? Well, what's the implementation into a daily lifestyle? And all of these are equal factors. And I can't, like, if you're over there talking about how it's so effective for you because it helps you stay motivated, etc., and then I'm trying to fight you and say, no, it doesn't work because the physiology is off, like, we're not even having the same conversation. So like, how can I refute you on that? And that's the biggest thing with keto or anything else we have to understand is, yes, we can talk about the science, but if somebody walks up to me and says, hey, look, I went on keto and it was the first diet I've ever tried, or I've tried 25 diets, they've all failed. Keto is the first one that worked for me. I've been amazing. I haven't had cake or cookies or crackers in 7 months. I feel fantastic. I love nutrition now. I have a better relationship for it. I look forward to it and health my body, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, how can I tell you that's wrong?
Yeah.
Like, how can I say that's a bad thing?
Yeah.
And I can point you all to the science that says, hey, keto's not that great, actually.
Yeah.
Like, boy, that sounds like that's pretty good.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's generally my take on it. Like, if you look at the science of it, it's not ultra impressive. It doesn't seem to be massively beneficial, especially when equated for calories and equated for protein, especially for fat loss. There are some sort of some few clinical cases where a ketogenic diet seems to be advantageous, but there's plenty of clinical cases, cancer cases, where it's actually not good and it can actually be more harmful.
Yeah. And I've heard that because a lot of times there's research out there with, ketosis and cancer prevention and for epilepsy.
Yeah. I mean, a review paper just came out last week that put the whole thing out there, and it was like, dude, there's a significant number of different cancers that feed on ketone bodies.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard that. Yeah.
Dude, like, if you think that we found, like, stumbled upon the magical anything,
Yeah, you're right.
There's no free passes in physiology, dude.
You're right. Because there's always, I mean, and my wife, it's funny because anytime I read something and get excited about it, my wife's like, it's going to change in 5 years. Like that's our whole thing is like, it's going to change in 5 years. It's going to change in 5 years, you know?
Dude, we've been around for whatever, 200,000, 2 million years. And you think if there was something magical like that, like, oh, just don't eat carbs.
Yeah.
Like, come on. Like we would have figured it out by now.
Right.
So it doesn't seem to be particularly great for growing muscle mass. It doesn't seem to be particularly great for any anaerobic athlete.
And you're saying that because the carbohydrate, because carbohydrate, right, is it feeds the muscle a lot quicker, right? Because ketones travel through the blood, carb is right there. So you do an exercise, right?
Yeah, exactly. So when you exercise, you're using mostly the carbohydrates that are stored directly in that exercising muscle.
Yeah.
When you use fat, whether it's ketones or not, and it's generally not, but it can be a ketone, that's coming from the entire body. So it has to be, first of all, it has to go through lipolysis, has to be broken down where it's being stored, has to be put in the blood, has to be transported into the muscle and used. It's just a far slower process.
Yeah.
And what other people don't understand is actually fat is far less metabolically efficient than carbohydrates. Like per molecule of oxygen, carbohydrates are far more efficient. So people like, I don't know where we get this idea that like fat burning is better for you.
Right.
Like people have to really get this out of their head that like fat burning, using fat as a fuel is not losing fat on my body. Like that's not the same thing at all.
Yeah.
So if you like maximize your fat burning, that doesn't mean you're going to lose fat.
Yeah.
It's also not going to improve endurance performance. Like that data is very clear. If you enhance max fat oxidation, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to run your marathon any faster. And the data is very clear on that. There's been dozens of studies now.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean fat burning is completely useless. There are major advantages to it, but it's not just like that's not how it works.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of information out there that says if you want to burn fat, eat more fat. Right.
That's just silly.
Yeah. And there's a ton, I mean, a lot of people, I should say, and not necessarily, I haven't seen the clear cut evidence, obviously. I mean, have you seen a lot of evidence for that?
It's not evidence, dude. Like that's basic chemistry. That's not right.
Yeah.
Like, there's fundamental chemistry that suggests like, I mean, now having said that, if somebody increased their fat intake and for a bunch of other reasons lost fat, like, okay, that's good. Yeah. So like you could show me all your cases. Well, my friend increased their fat intake. Okay, great. Like awesome. Like don't get it wrong. We're on the same team here. Like I want your friend to be healthier. I want them to reach their goals. Like, you're not going to like shut me down. I'm going to be like, yes, awesome, dude. Fabulous. We all won.
Right.
Like we're not fighting here. We're on the same team.
Right.
Like it's not about being right. It's about helping you because like I said at the beginning here, talking about the science of it is also not paying attention to the behavior or the motivation or the psychology or the ease of implementation. So like, for example, if I said, hey, carbs are bad, don't eat carbs, boom. And that's the only thing I told you. And you in your head, because you're running a business and you don't really care about this field that much, you don't want to dive deep into it and be a nerd about it like we do. And you go, okay, let me try this diet. Like I have a friend who's doing this right now. He's been on keto for like 3 years and he's not even remotely on keto, but he thinks he is.
Yeah.
Like he totally thinks he is.